Parents with nanny cams, what have you caught your babysitter doing? I house/dog sit for friends of my parents. The first time I did it, they mentioned they had a security camera by the front door that was motion activated, and I didn't really think anything of it. They were gone for a few weeks. They come home. Their 2 giant huskies are happy. I get paid and all was well. A couple weeks later my mom calls me laughing. My parents had dinner with the friends I dog sit for, and they showed a video to my parents from the front door cam. Apparently all it showed was me sprinting full speed down the hallway, a dog toy in hand, biggest stupid grin on my face, followed by the 2 huskies running and sliding after me, followed by me, followed by the huskies, over and over and over, and over again. I sit for them as often as I can. Edit. Wow, this comment blowing up was the best thing to wake up to. My first awards on Reddit, y'all. Thank you, sweet strangers. Yes to wholesome content on the internet. For those asking, here's a picture of the crazy pups. My grandpa was staying with my parents, but they figured it best to hire the regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight, since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task and they were attending a wedding a couple hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple room, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, living room and kitchen, all motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home, and their master bedroom cam had never been triggered before. When they returned they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered, so they decided to take a look. Cut to footage of my grandpa and the sitter both naked, aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering while intertwined towards the bed, and then about 20 minutes of banging on my parents' bed. The sitter was about 20 years old and my grandpa was around 70 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his ass off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her, and she just apologized and said there was connection or some shit to that matter. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, at my age you must seize every opportunity. I wish there was audio for the build up. I lay awake at night sometimes just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to get in that sitter's pants. We have a nest in our kids' room and living/dining. You can see partially into the kitchen from the living room cam, but not much point. About the second week into using a new sitter we catch her talking tons of shit about my wife and how she coddles our 18-month-old son. Bragged about how she was going to quit at the end of the day because she hates working for us and doesn't like our son. While she's in the kitchen she puts him in his high chair and turns on an iPad for him to watch Elmo. No screen time allowed. He asks to get down and go play after a few minutes and she says no. He starts to cry and she basically yells at him, "Oh my god, are you serious right now? You're so damn needy." So he cries harder. About 10 minutes later she takes him back to his room where he calms down. I get home a few minutes later and send her on the way. Sitter, oh, you're home early. We had a rough morning, but we are feeling better now. Me, yeah. Hey, you know that camera in the living room is on all the time and I can hear everything you say and do in the kitchen, right? She kinda stuttered and I told her to get fo. Then me and my kid hung out all day and had a blast. The thing that got me was being mean to my son, like he's not even 2 yet. Not a nanny cam, but a vid. My sil sat the camera down thinking she turned it off. I have over an hour of her teasing my toddler in a mean way with candy and popsicles. She started telling him that he would get some, then held it just out of reach. She then ate it in front of him, making mmmmmmm sounds. She was also calling him mean and weird names like Turt Muncher and Ricky Retardo. The camera got all the audio, but only some video. At the end of the video is when we got home. When I confronted her with the video, she started claiming I doctored it. I was a liar and a shat and hated her because she was prettier than my wife. She is not. That was the last time she was allowed around either of our kids unsupervised. She was the sil for 10ish years and is now the crazy Karen ex-sil. I can't have a presence on social media because she attacks me all the time, says Liz etc. I'm also estranged from my brother because of her 10 years of her warped his perception of our family. He still thinks some of the whacked out things she accused our dad, sister, other brother, and various other family members of. No reasoning has convinced him of the truth, not even the thought that, if video evidence refutes some of the claims, then all can be considered suspect. I may get comments and advice of what I could do, but in the end you can't fight crazy, and sometimes life is just not fair. The only thing I have done to make things better is ignore her. She eventually just starts attacking someone else, like an annoying yipping dog that just needs to annoy. As for my brother, I hope time will help to fix things. I also think that he might just be more like her than I think. Birds of a feather fly together. What did our nanny do? Oh boy. About 2 years ago, after our son was born with some breathing issues. He has a rare form of dwarfism and his airway is just smaller than most. We were issued a state-funded nursing. A nurse came at night to watch him overnight and make sure he was safe. At the time he was very stable and really didn't need the nursing, but because he had a trach tube, so you legally need the nursing. He had, at the time, a tracheotomy tube. He was a little over 4 months old at the time of this incident. One night I heard his oxygen monitor beeping, which was not unusual, since it frequently malfunctioned. We had been so tired from getting up all the time from the beeping and stupid crap that the nurses would frequently do, so I didn't hear it for quite a while. These were not highly trained nurses. We had been getting very little sleep for months. Very high stress. I walk in, and the baby is royal blue and lifeless. An image I will never be able to erase from my brain. The oxygen monitor says 20% oxygen. Normal would be 95, 100%. I yell to my wife, who happens to be a surgeon, and she rushes in, and we both start doing CPR on our kid. We call 911. The nurse is standing there just kind of staring the whole time. She didn't call 911. She didn't call us. I didn't understand what the fuck just happened. We do CPR for 15 minutes. No sign of life. The EMT get there and do CPR for another 12 minutes. At the end of the 12 minutes they get some small signs of life and rush him off to the ER. My wife hops in the back of the ambulance and continues to do life-saving measures for the whole ride. At the hospital they call a code and do life-saving measures for another 2 hours. He was in and out. When I got to the hospital they brought over the chaplain and asked us these of end-of-life questions. He survived the whole ordeal, but suffered significant right and left-sided brain damage. He is 3 now and making great progress, but I believe he will never be the same. He doesn't talk yet but is getting close. He says a few words. He is a good kid. Only a few days prior to the incident set up cameras in the room because the nurses seemed a little unsafe, but I had no choice. Long story there. I went back and watched the recorded video. Here's what really happened. The nurse, either on purpose or by accident, had taken the nebulizer machine, an air mister, to blow medicine into your airway, and in an attempt to give him his breathing treatment, accidentally or on purpose, attached it directly to his airway, trach. Meaning that instead of gently misting medicine into his airway, he had a strong burst of compressed air being forced into him. It punctured his lung, think a balloon being blown up and popping, and caused crepitus, air under the skin, and he was without oxygen for over 6 minutes. If it weren't for the nurse, he'd be fine. He was a stable kid who needed a little extra help in the beginning of his life to get to average. He was not a child on life support. His form of dwarfism is limiting, but oftentimes these kids have higher IQs than average, and we don't know why. Unfortunately that won't be the case for him. If it weren't for my wife being a doctor and constantly saving lives he'd be dead, without question. She is a professional life-saving master. I knew CPR, but she knew exactly what to do to save his life, and not to quit. We had a few extra life-saving things like an ambu bag and we were able to save his life. Because of that we sued the nursing company and won, of course. The money goes into an account to provide services for him for the rest of his life. After we are gone we want to make sure someone will take care of him. The nurse did not get her license revoked. She is still practicing. We tried to appeal to the nursing board, but that was the result. Oh god. I was the house slash pet sitter NSFW warning. A little over a year ago I reconnected with someone very special to me, and we has both recently moved back home. Shortly there, after I was house sitting for a friend, I brought my new friend and current partner over to hang out. We had agreed that we would not have sex for as long as possible because we were both very serious about each other right off the bat. That said, as soon as we had the space we started getting very weird. So eventually we were both naked and trading handies and mouthies. I recommended we move to the hot tub out back, and so we did. This is where I pulled out all the stops. Fingering, cunnilingus, analingus. It was all out. We got to a point that we couldn't go further without full-fledged intercourse, so we stopped, cuddled and went to sleep. The next day, while chilling before work outside, I looked up and spotted a nightmare. Not only was there a security camera pointed right at the hot tub, just to the left I noticed a woman glaring at me in what was clearly a child's bedroom across the street. The camera footage was never brought up, but I'll always remember the look that mom gave me. I just hope it was her that saw the things I did and not her children. TLDR, unknowingly licked my girlfriend's asshole in front of a camera and a neighbor while house sitting. Get a nanny cam. My parents never had one. I will never put my child, if I ever have one, in the hands of a nanny slash babysitter because of how I was treated as a child. I must have been 5-6 years old, and I still remember. I'm 30. My brother and I shared a room. When we'd sleep at night we'd talk to each other a bit whilst in our beds until we slept. For some reason our babysitter really didn't like that, and she would duct tape our mouths shut, then rip the tape off again and again to make it hurt. It would rip the skin off your lips. Another time was when I was eating my food, again at 5-6 years old. She slapped me so hard across the face out of nowhere. I remember feeling so shocked and scared. She shouted at me to not chew with my molars and to only chew with my 2 front teeth. I knew that didn't make sense, but as a kid you put your trust in adults, I guess. Another time, she stuck up her middle finger in my face for a while. She was seething with hate. And yet she was this angelic person in front of my parents. I never told anything about it to my parents. Even to this day, my parents weren't really involved with me as a kid. Their relationship was really bad when they had me, so I think they were fed up of everything. They're now divorced, so I didn't really feel I had anyone to turn to, like someone who had my back, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, that lack of involvement by my parents was obvious to my school, and I was bullied like crazy by the faculty there. I don't want to go into details about that, but it was bad and really affected me as a person. But at the time, you look at them as teachers slash adults and feel everything they do must be right. My mom even said she felt my soul was robbed at that school and she doesn't know why she kept me there. Basically, I've learned, but only realized when I was older, that there are so many adults that are two-faced and are deranged enough to abuse a child, physically or mentally, way more than we think. They portray themselves as angelic, but behind the parents' back they are demons. I would never be able to trust another person with my child. I'm gonna answer this from the nanny's side. I nannied my 4-month-old cousin for 9 months, give or take. My aunt and uncle own a bunch of t-shirt slash touristy shops, so they were really busy all the time. Because of their store success they are really well off. Beautiful cars, a condo with a private elevator in transit, etc. I also helped manage some aspect of the stores, so we went into the situation as I wasn't family at work, but nanny and part-time store help. No workers or managers knew who I really was, and it was to be kept like that. I wasn't to have workers, new friends, to the family house for privacy reasons. I wasn't to tell them who I was, or where I lived. It went as far as I had to remove any information online, and make new social medias. I agreed to all of these rules for the safety of my family, no questions asked ever. I was told to not trust these employees, that they knew we were well off and would do anything to steal from us. My aunt and uncle said they never believed them. About 8 months in, my aunt texts me before work asking me to meet them in the kitchen. I stop getting ready and head to the kitchen. Strange because my aunt and I were super close. She usually come right into my room. I go out to the kitchen and they are sitting at the counter. My uncle, by marriage, looks at me and says, so schedule is changing today. You're going home today. I was so confused and puzzled. My aunt started bawling her eyes out. One of my girls perfectly described our ceiling lights in the living room. She barely managed to get out. Again I was baffled. My uncle proceeds to go on about safety and why he did not want their address out. He said they feared for their lives and would need to move. He then told me I had to leave as soon as possible. I just stared at my aunt, one of my best friends, waiting for her to say something. I was never even given a chance to tell them I never once had people over, other than a home friend who flew out to see me. They paid for her flight. That it was likely they saw the background from a Snapchat sent or a FaceTime call. I went back to my room, packed up my life into 2 suitcases, called a car service, paid $150, and looked for flights. My aunt ended up knocking on my door semi-apologizing, offering me a ride to the airport. It was an awkward hour and a half, most me quietly crying, while sitting next to my cousin. We got the airport, I said bye to my baby, grabbed my luggage, said thanks for the ride and walked away. I only see them at holidays now, when they come into town. My cousin is 4 years old now. I don't talk to my aunt or her husband. I miss her and her friendship so much. I guess this situation would be considered the worst thing you caught your babysitter doing, although I never did it. Point being, a nanny is hard. You open your heart and life up to someone. You are extremely vulnerable to their needs. It truly is emotional. Don't nanny for family. My friend's BO dad has 4 kids through another relationship and a dog, and my friend told me this story. The kids are a 13-year-old, a 6-year-old boy and girl, and a 2-year-old. They had to go out of town a lot because my friend does swim and always have their sister do it because the 13-year-old liked to play with knives, but she was sick, so they hire a 24-year-old carer. Their resume was good, prior experience, good reviews, etc., so they hire them. When he shows up, he's 6'4", easily 240 pounds, and wearing an Abercrombie beanie, leaded shades, crucifix earring, Atari t-shirt, leather jacket, black and red athletic pants, and Vans. He introduces himself and is nice and polite with excellent etiquette. He begins listing all the things he can and is willing to do. The wife is still nervous though, as one would be, but they leave in an hour, so they can't do anything. They have a couple of nanny cams set up, so dad says it's fine, and they leave, after introducing him to the kids and the dog, and giving him a short list of chores. They get back, and he shakes their hand and leaves. They ask the eldest how it went, and he just says fine, and goes back to playing video games. Similar response from the 6-year-olds. When they check the cams, they see this. He immediately starts doing the laundry, dishes, and setting out food for the dog. Then I'm going through this per child. He plays several different video games with the 13-year-old, and after some small talk finds out that he loves to play cards. So they play Texas Hold'em for like an hour. For the 6-year-old, he brushes the girl's hair and helps her do makeup and lets her do his. He has a little sister who loves makeup too, and for the boy, he watches the Star Wars prequels with him and quotes memes. And finally plays with the baby for like hours, tosses her around, and sings Schubert to her. To top it off, he gets McDonald's for everyone, and even slips the baby a few fries, and lets everyone play with the dog on the backyard. After putting the kids to bed, he lays on the couch with their Rottweiler, who usually hates strangers, and falls asleep watching Frasier reruns. They've hired him every time since and always pay him triple his rate, $5.45 an hour. Edit. Sorry for all the changes of details. I've since spoken with my friend, and I got some of them wrong. I have cameras in different places in my house, mostly to keep an eye on the kids. A couple weeks ago, my son, who is almost 18, asked if he could watch his 5-year-old sister. It was a day off from school, so I had no problem with it. We went to his room before going to work and confirmed that he was awake and that he was ready to be a good brother and cook breakfast. When she woke up at work, around 8 AM, I got a detected movement in the hallway next to my daughter's room and then a notification from my living room. I turned the camera on and found that my daughter had came upstairs, got some cereal, and was watching Disney. I texted my son to see if he was awake, and he did not answer. I called, nothing. I pinged. iPhone loud noise. His phone. Nothing. I even remotely controlled my downstairs Alexa to blast crappy metal music at the highest volume. Nothing. Point. She's a smart kid, but certainly shouldn't be alone unsupervised. After about 30 minutes of trying to get a hold of him, I called the house and was able to talk to my daughter. I asked her if she tried to wake up brother, and she said she couldn't wake him up. She didn't get into specifics, so I was freaking out. Point. I was worried that he might have died or something and started calling around to local friends and family. No one was home. Point. After another hour, I just told my boss what was going on and left work. Point. When I got home, I made her some lunch and went to go investigate/berate my son. Turned out he chose the night prior to have an all-night gaming session with his friends, and him being awake when I came in at 6 AM was him still being up. Point. Needless to say, he didn't get paid. Not my story, but a friend's. I used to walk my dog with a lady, and she had a drawer in her house with money for her future grandchildren as her daughter was pregnant. One day she told me how stuff in the room had been moved around and money was missing from the envelope in the drawer. It wasn't her or her husband moving it, obviously, and with only a few people coming and going from the house, she decided to set up a camera in the room and put a note in the envelope saying, "You're caught on camera." And to the shock of both of us, it was the dog walker and dog trainer who we both attended classes with for 2 years. I was shown the footage, and it was bittersweet seeing the look on her face realizing she was caught red-handed, but I can't imagine how it must have felt to be let down by someone you trust and let into your home for years. She tried to blame it on her marriage breaking down and her financial situation for her child, but my friend was having none of it. She'd stolen over £1,000 in cash. She never reported her to the police or outed her to our local community, but made her pay back in monthly installments instead, and she obviously got a new dog walker. Not my story, but a story my teacher, I'll call her Tina, shared about her children and their ex-nanny. So this nanny was a little older lady that had some medical issues, so she needed to bring her medication to Tina's house to take during the day. Tina was fine with this, but asked what type of medications they were just in case anything bad happened, but the nanny wouldn't tell her and said that it wouldn't happen. So she didn't need to know. Tina found this really weird, obviously, but she really needed this nanny, so she let it be for a little bit. After a few days her son started complaining about a stomachache, and Tina just thought it was from eating too much candy or something, so she let it go. But then her son started to vomit and had a really high fever. She asked him if he had eaten anything weird, and he said no. Then she called the nanny just in case he didn't remember eating anything weird. On the call the nanny said that she doesn't remember anything weird, but she wasn't sure. Tina decided to look through the nanny cam just in case he had gotten into something the nanny didn't know about. She didn't see him eating anything weird, but did see that the nanny had spilled her pills all over the floor earlier in the day, which she never mentioned. Then Tina started to worry that her kid had gotten into some medication that she didn't even know the name of. As she was bringing her son to the hospital, she called the nanny and said that he had gotten into some of the spilled pills and just asked what pills she had spilled, calmly. The nanny wouldn't tell her. Tina then asked her again, but less calm, but she still wouldn't tell her anything. Her reasoning was that Tina didn't need to know what meds she was taking and that it was too personal. While on the phone, Tina arrived at the hospital and the doctor said he needed to know the medication so he could help the kid. The nanny still wouldn't say anything. Tina was now freaking out because her son could be dying and the nanny wouldn't say anything. The doctor then took Tina's phone and told the nanny that if she didn't tell him what medicine she spilled, that the child would die. The nanny said it was Benadryl. That's what she was so upset about. Tina knowing the kid was allergic to Benadryl. Tina hadn't known this yet and had eaten so much of it that he got sick. Not me personally, but I work as a dog walker / pet sitter, and my employer has a terrible story about one of her other ex-employees. My employer hired this woman who had had her own dog sitting business for a while and she seemed nice and caring. Her first clients were one of my employer's longtime clients, and my employer was looking to retire and hand over her loyal clients to trustworthy people. So she has this woman dog sit the 2 German pointers for 2 weeks while the family is on vacation. The 2 weeks go by, the fam gets back, and the dogs seem totally fine. A month later the dad was going through the footage of the cameras they had in the house. Don't really know why, but it wasn't related to the dog sitter initially, and he remembered the dog sitter and got curious. So he watched some footage of those 2 weeks. It turns out she had dumped the dog's food all over the floor. She was supposed to give them 2 measured meals a day, had not taken them on one single walk. The fam had paid for 2 walks a day and had let them sheet and piss all over the floor because they hadn't been outside for 2 whole weeks. She just cleaned up the sheet and piss when she'd visit next. Wouldn't it just be easier to take them outside? Damn. On top of this, she did not come twice a day as they had paid for. She came once every 2 to 4 days. Absolutely appalling. Those poor puppies. So anyway, my employer fired her real quick, but she disappeared before they could try and get any money back. I also feel bad for my employer because she's known that family and those dogs for a while and felt like she had let them down. I can't stand people who can treat animals like that. Not a sitter, but the maintenance man and a burglar. My dog hadn't been feeling well, so I set up a camera aimed at her crate so I could check on her while I was at work. If there was sound detected, it would start playing through my phone. Typically all I'd ever hear was her lapping up water and the occasional dog sneeze. I had a notice that maintenance was doing the rounds, going into the apartments. Dogs weren't allowed, but I had special permission, and part of the agreement was that there was a small dog in residence sticker on my door. So one day through my phone, I hear a knock and a man announce maintenance. He does it twice more before I hear the keys. I hear him walk through the one room, then come to the room with the crate, and he suddenly is all surprised and goes, "Oh, there really is a dog in here." And then proceeds to do his task all while talking to the dog about what it is he's doing. I checked the video feed to see if the dog was panicked or anything, but she laid there staring at him. I think she was happy because he just talked to her the whole time and explained how he changed the HVAC filters. Maybe a week or 2 after this, I suddenly hear this weird MIDI ringtone come through my phone, and it's from the dog camera app. A coworker was in my office and was like, "What the fuck is that?" We checked the video and my dog had crammed herself in the back corner of the cage and looked terrified. We listened closely and heard all sorts of noises, but they weren't too loud. The ringtone was the only thing loud enough to trip the sound detection, but then it stayed on. My coworker called 911 and I left and went home. The police got there before me and found that my door was open, but on first glance nothing appeared to be wrong. When I looked more, I found that all my jewelry boxes and drawers had been rummaged through. We think the noise we heard was the ringtone from the burglar's cell phone, like he had an old style one. I moved a few months after that incident. A couple of years ago we hired a dog sitter to watch our dogs while we were away on vacation. We had used this woman the time before and had thought everything went well, so we hired her again. I had recently picked up a Nest Cam for the living room to keep an eye on the animals when we are not home. I had informed the woman that we had gotten a camera, to which she was okay with, so we were paying her over $400 to come by the house 3x a day for 10 days to let the dogs out and to spend time with them. So the camera gives alerts upon seeing a person, so we would know what times she was getting there. Turns out she was literally coming in, letting the dogs outside for a few minutes, checking their food and leaving. She was in and out in 5 minutes. The poor pups wanted attention. So we said something to her about it after the second day. Asked her to spend a little more time there as we were paying her to stay for 20 to 30 minutes each visit. She got pissed. She said the camera is a bad idea and she doesn't need to be told how to do her job. The next morning she comes over and immediately covers the camera with a towel. Now we are not happy about the situation. We ask her to remove the towel and she refuses, saying that the camera stresses out the dogs. What the fuck? So I decide to track when my alarm system was disarmed and armed. So same thing again. She's spending 5 minutes at the house. Long story short, I get my cousin to take over, we give her the boot, and we never get any money back. Me and the wife took her cousin in after he had a nasty breakup with his boyfriend and wanted to move back close to home. We let him live rent free for 4 months and then started charging $350 a month all inclusive. His parents had the gall to shop around for a better rate. We live in a southern US metropolitan area where rent on a 1-Brit apartment in a Section 8 community is $650-700/NO. We live in a nice neighborhood in a 3-Brit brick ranch house. I thought $350 was a good deal. Anyways, while he was living with us, I was casually noticing things would go missing. Mostly loose cash I had sworn I put in my nightstand, and my weed wasn't lasting nearly as long. It got to the point where I openly asked him and my wife if they were smoking it. My wife consumed, but only a fraction of what I smoked, and they both proceeded to gaslight me saying I was stressed at work and that's why I was smoking more and not noticing. Fast forward a couple months after this conversation, and I had just bought a small bag and smoked maybe once or twice out of it and then had to leave on a business trip for a week. My wife was also out of town for work that week, so it was just her cousin in the house. I get home and the bag is almost empty. Keep in mind I had hidden it away in my nightstand next to my bed. So now I know I'm not crazy. We then bought a Nest camera, and since we are naturally messy people it was really easy to hide it in a pile of cloths on top of my dresser. It took less than 30 seconds after I left the house, when my wife was also gone, to catch him red-handed. He was sneaking like a commando and looking out the window cause he thought I'd pulled back in the driveway. Aside from the obvious trust violation and all the arguments I had with my wife telling her he was stealing long before we got the camera, was that I couldn't really tell anyone, especially her family. My wife has a good relationship with her aunt, which is why we agreed to take the cousin in, but she would have sided with her son, and it would have cost my wife a relationship. So now I have to go to family functions wearing a big fake smile and pretending everything is hunky-dory. I love my wife and I would do it all again if asked, but man, it irks me seeing people abuse my trust then get off scot-free. Edit. Bad spelling. Mobile autocorrect. I guess I was sort of the nanny cam. Parents hired a babysitter for me and my 2 younger brothers. I was like 12. One brother was 10, the other around 4. It was their first time leaving us all alone, so a sitter seemed like a bright idea, only the sitter invited her boyfriend over without telling my parents and went into our bathroom. They shut the door, locked it, and turned the light out for like 30 minutes. They tried to buy our silence, but I was very much not comfortable with a random dude I never met just coming into my house while my parents were away. So telling my parents about it was literally the first thing I did when I saw them. My father was a Houston police officer at the time, so he just channeled that energy when scolding the young girl. I've been on the receiving end of that authoritarian yelling more than once, but she faked up pretty bad, and I didn't exactly feel bad for her. I can still remember the girl leaving the house in a hurry and tears after the harsh scolding she got from my father. Concluded it wasn't as bad for her as it probably was for me, since I'm fully aware that my father has killed people. She wasn't. So when I was getting scolded growing up, that was something that I had to factor into my defiance, and oh boy was I a defiant child. I absolutely deserved everything that came my way. Hopefully she learned not to just let random people into homes that aren't hers. We hired a nanny when our daughter was a little over 1 year old. She had a son who was about the same age as our daughter, and we were excited she would have a playmate on certain days when the nanny was at our home. After about a week, maybe 2, we noticed significant regression with our daughter's behavior. She was screaming a lot, fighting her naps, covering her ears, hitting herself. We had a hidden nanny cam in our living room, and then one in the nursery that looked like an addition to the handheld monitor camera. I had previously watched the cameras and didn't see anything amiss, so I pulled it up and watched all of the video recordings. I was horrified. On the days a nanny brought her son with her to our home, she treated him worse than dirt. She yelled all day long at him. I watched this woman lay my child down for a nap, then snatch her son up by his arm like a rag doll, hit him hard, and scream that she would beat us, as if he touched the sound machine she had just turned on. Meanwhile, our daughter was being traumatized by this. We rarely even talk sternly to her or give her time out, so I can only imagine how terrifying it was for her to witness abuse like that over and over. I can't confirm because of the limited video evidence, but I imagine she treated her son that way every time he came with her. Only a matter of time before she snatched our daughter up threatened her, or worse point needless to say, we did not allow her back into our home. When I ultimately confronted her about her behavior, she acknowledged she had a serious problem. I hope she got help, or that seeing herself treat her son that way opened her eyes to the damage she was doing. I still pray for him and hope he is okay. Makes me cry just typing this out. Edited to @ I immediately reported her to the online platform we hired her through and to an agency. I know the online platform made her remove her profile, or maybe she did that on her own. She seemed to disappear after I confronted her. Once you make a report to an agency, it is out of your hands, so I know nothing more about whether it was investigated, etc. Not my story but my brother's. My 9-year-old nephew has autism, so his caretakers always have pretty extensive credentials. They just moved to a new city, so they were still finding new helpers and babysitters for my nephew. She interviewed this girl, late 20s and quite pretty, to watch my nephew. Extensive credentials and experience with special needs children. They talk and go through getting her oriented for close to an hour. Everything seems in place and the woman seems like a good fit, so my sister-in-law decides to take my other, younger nephew to a movie. About 20 minutes after leaving, and just before going into the movie, Maisel gets a motherly vibe that she should check in on the cameras, just to make sure everything is alright. She sees the new nanny laying on the sofa with her pants down and her breast exposed, masturbating while trying to get my nephew to come closer and touch her. Maisel immediately started heading back to the house and called the neighbors to go over and knock on the door to keep the nanny busy until the cops arrived. Cops arrived, so showed them the camera footage and they arrested the nanny on the spot. Like I stated before, she was attractive so probably wouldn't have any issues getting laid. She had a master's in child therapy focusing on special needs children. Threw it all away in an instant. It just blows my mind. Even crazier, the cameras weren't even hidden. She clearly had some pretty deep issues, but it is terrifying to think how long she had been doing this to other children. If she was attempting to do this to my nephew pretty much as soon as Maisel left. I guess you can never judge a book by its cover. In response to all the people raging about pet owners pasting in this thread, almost anyone that looks after and cares for a small, helpless, expensive, and unsanitary creature likes to talk about it. Doesn't matter if it's a baby or a dog or a teenager. I personally blame parents who never stop talking about their kids for the rise in dog owners, or parents if you like, that talk about their dogs, or fur babies if you like. I know 3 people in our office who don't have kids and hate hearing about kids that make a point of talking about their dogs, as if they are kids, to subvert the constant baby talk in the office. Thing is, it's now getting to be a habit for them too. I have a cat and a dog. Never talk about either in the office, unless asked for the record. I saw as many stories about doorbell cams as dog cams, but you're not ragging on that subset of the thread. This leads me to theorize your intent is actually to just be inflammatory, and perhaps because you resent your thunder being stolen when you want to talk about your kids and people don't think they are the most important thing. TLDR, if you were really upset about the principle and not just trolls, you would broaden your complaint to not just the pet owners. I moved into a house with a guy roommate who was quirky to say the least. He had 3 cameras in the main parts of the house, so he can watch his dogs from work. A few months in, and the situation was not working. He was OCD and socially aggressive, while I was clean, but not clean enough, and enjoyed my quiet time and space. My room was next to the stairs, and I couldn't believe how loud walking up them was. I worked nights and he would be up and down them all day, going from his office to his car or the kitchen, etc. One day I pull up the camera app to see what he was up to, and found he wasn't going anywhere with a purpose. He was deliberately jump stomping up and down each step to wake me for no goddamn reason. He even put his big winter boots on in August before clogging down the stairs, and at one point just tossed a huge box of paint cans and other loud shit down the stairs, then methodically picked everything back up and put it back in the closet. He denied, but was clearly trying to drive me out of there as soon as possible. I obliged. Fact that passive aggressive TW at. And before you ask, this wasn't part of his OCD, he only did it while I was trying to sleep. He also knew paint thinner made me nauseated. Woke up one time hours early because the basement was full of fumes. He decided to stain a random ass door in the living room instead of his workshop and leave it with windows closed despite it being very nice out.